I'd like to call to order the Finance Committee meeting on June 4th at 4:30. Do roll call. Alderman Hinkfist, sorry.
Here.
Alderman Johnson.
Here.
And Alderman Galvin is excused. And entertain motion for approval of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Approval of the minutes.
So moved. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Letter E, regular business. Consideration with possible action to approve a contract with Security Pro Intel Inc. for security guard services at Green Bay City Hall.
I can speak to that.
Yeah.
So in 2024, as part of the budget process, City Council authorized adding $150,000 to the City Hall budget, specifically for security upgrades at City Hall. This is one of those proposed upgrades. So the purchasing department worked closely with Parks, Police Department, and Risk Management to quote out these services to a local security firm. 4 companies provided quotes. Of that, 3 city employees scored all of the proposals, and the city is proposing to contract service with the highest scoring proposal, which is Security Pro Intel Incorporated. So the police department was involved with the reviewing of these proposals and are in agreement with the recommendation. Commander Wark was going to come here, but he had a prior commitment, so he wasn't able to be here to answer questions. But I did talk to him about this proposal. So if approved, this company would provide 1 armed security guard at City Hall during regular operating hours, which would be Monday through Friday from 7 to 5. In the summer, it would slightly differ to accommodate summer hours for City Hall. The proposal did not include staffing with a security guard during night meetings. So for night meetings, we would do very similar to what we do now, where as needed, police department would send an armed officer. They already do that for all of the city council meetings, but if it's needed for a meeting like this, it would be on a case-by-case basis. The security guard would wear a uniform so that people would know it would be a security guard. And the selected uniform would be a dress coat with a logo or a badge on their sport coat, and then dressed casual pants. And they would be carrying a firearm as part of this also, so they would be an armed security guard. There would be 1 officer here. Each guard selected to work here would go through an extensive background check with the necessary training for this type of work. Each guard assisted or assigned to City Hall would be licensed by the Wisconsin Department of Safety and Professional Services. All candidates would have to complete a firearm training course and would be licensed for carrying a firearm. And then they would also be required to pass a state and federal background check. No officer could be convicted of a felony or a Class B misdemeanor within the last 3 years. And the police department would be able to review and approve the background checks and drug screening results and training experience for any armed guard that would be stationed here at City Hall. So the city police department would have final say on the officers working here. The anticipated cost for the service would be $94,000 annually. Because it's already into June, we're anticipating that for this year it would be about half of that cost, because we're only taking it from June through the end of the calendar year, and then we can renew the services January 1st if that line item gets approved in the budget again for these services. So right now, there is adequate funding for this armed security guard. And what this armed security guard would be doing is they would be stationed downstairs on the first floor. They would do a patrol before we open the doors in the morning to make sure everything's safe for people coming into work and the public to come into City Hall after we open the doors. And then they would be responsible to check people in and answer questions. So if somebody comes, they would check them in and then tell them where they're supposed to be. So in summary, that would be the job duties. And then they'll be patrolling throughout the day to the various floors. I think I pretty much handled most of the summary. I guess, do you have any specific questions?
Go ahead.
Maybe you can just give me a little history, because you said this has been pre-approved, would have been last budget season? And what is necessitating an armed officer
So
at City Hall?
there were several events that happened at City Hall that warranted the city to look at this as an option. When the city council allocated the $150,000, it wasn't for any one specific purpose. So what the city did, the risk management department and the police department, they completed a security assessment of City Hall, and that was one of the recommendations in the plan. And so it's kind of going off of that recommendation. But the city council did not officially approve hiring a security company as part of that money. They just allocated the money and told the police department, in essence, use it for, what you feel is necessary. In this case, it's over $25,000, and so that's why it's being brought forward to this committee for approval, because anything over $25,000 needs committee and council approval.
And have we done any assessment of people that come in asking, I'm just thinking walking into City Hall and seeing an armed guard sitting there. It's kind of like, whoa. So are there other cities, other towns that do this?
There are other cities and other towns that do it. I think, unfortunately, I don't have those answers. I wasn't too involved with the process. Police chief can answer that at the council if you have specific questions, or you can reach out to the police chief or Commander Warwick prior to council. If you want, we can ask him that question, and you can email a response to all the council members, however you want to handle that. But I do know that there are other municipalities that do this. Which ones, I don't know off the top of my head.
I think it's important that, all city employees definitely feel safe, and if it's something that's warranted, maybe I'll have you call the county. So,
Did you have any more? Any other questions? Ken?
no?
Okay.
And my recollection when we talked about this, the last time this came before council, I can't remember who submitted the communication. Somebody did. Do you remember that?
I don't remember the details.
Okay,
of
but
it.
one of the things, we kind of had like a broader discussion, right? Which is, do we need it? Do we not need it? What's precipitating this? And I think that's the thing that's missing for me right now is the why, right? Like a couple of isolated incidents, does that warrant $100,000 a year that's ongoing in perpetuity, right? Is this the highest need? If I gave City of Green Bay government $100,000 right now, is this the number one thing on our list, right? And that's just, I want to feel more confidence in knowing that that is the need. And because part of that conversation was around security, and I agree with Alder Hinkfest, our employees need to feel safe. They not just feel safe, they need to be safe, right? And we talked about a lot of other things, and my recollection of that conversation was we wanted a holistic proposal from staff and not piecemeal. And this feels piecemeal to me, which is we're giving you this item right now, but we're not talking about some of the other conversations that we had, which would be closing off the other floors from public access, reconfiguring, right? Because to me, customer service is everything. And right now, when you walk into City Hall, you're not greeted by anything. And right now, you're going to be recruited or greeted by armed security. That is our front door to City Hall. And if we want the customer service experience to be better, we need to have a better experience. And that, to me, goes the wrong direction. So, I'm trying to wrap my brain around what are some of the other anticipated things. Does this need to be approved now? Can it wait until those other things? What is some of the, again, the background, right, that got us here? And is this truly like a necessary investment? So can you kind of, I know I just threw a lot at you, right? But can you kind of walk me through that?
So what I can tell you is the city did create a security study for City Hall. A lot of those recommendations that you mentioned are in there as recommendations.
That might have been the discussion that we
And-
had, yeah.
And I guess the city has, we do have plans to spend the full $150,000. We are working on that. How much I can say at this meeting, I think I would defer to the police department, because these are security upgrades. Obviously, some of that is public knowledge, other things are, maybe are not public knowledge from a security standpoint. So I would say, you know, if we want to, you know, have the holistic discussion on what other improvements we're doing to City Hall, I would say we probably should put that on the next committee agenda for discussion and maybe have closed session language on there. Because, like I said, I don't know which stuff the public
Sure, sure.
should know and which stuff they shouldn't
No,
know.
that makes a ton of sense.
But I will tell you that as part of this funding, we are looking at accomplishing some of those same things that you mentioned. I will say we won't be able to accomplish all of it with the funding that we have, but we can kind of piece it off a little bit at a time and take care of the highest priorities.
And I think that's the piece that I'm struggling with,
Yep.
right? Because I don't know what those other things are.
Yep.
And I appreciate staff's recommendation, but our role, I think, is to vet that. And I don't know what the other things are,
Yeah.
right? So I'm having a really hard time prioritizing if this is the number one thing or if something else is the number one thing.
Yeah, and what I can tell you is, you know, one thing that is, we've been talking about for a long time is trying to get a lot of public meetings on the first floor. I think that's common knowledge, a lot of people are aware of that. Recently, what we've done is we've relocated purchasing and payroll, which used to be on the first floor, we've relocated them to the fourth floor. And so now that location is wide open. And so our plan is to convert that into a meeting room, possibly using some of this funding to do that, so that we can then host more meetings on the first floor instead of scattered throughout. And so we are kind of in the process of doing that already, and we've relocated
Are you
two
addressing,
divisions.
are you addressing workflow? And what I mean by that, because right now, you have to go to third floor to pay your parking ticket. You have to go to fourth floor to deal with your long weed complaint. You have to go to, you know, fifth floor to get your park permit. You've got to go to sixth floor to get your building permit. So like, are we talking about that flow? Because obviously, none of that works. You know what I mean, to put all your stuff on the first floor if
Yep.
we don't address that.
Yeah, we are talking about ways of approaching that. There's a lot of different trains of thought on that. We don't have a specific plan recommended yet that we can go to the city council and say, this is the best way to do it. But we are discussing various options of how to do that. And maybe, you know, station a new counter somewhere, either do it in the clerks or maybe at the welcome counter there. I mean, we've talked about various options, but we don't have a proposal for you on that. And again, like I said, this $150,000 only goes so far.
Right.
Because some of those are infrastructure improvements and renovations to the building itself in order to accommodate those changes. So I think that this funding is not, it's not kind of one and done. It's going to have to be recurring year after year, of which the police department feels strongly that this is well worth the money to at least proceed with on this portion. If nothing else, let's proceed for the remainder of this year. That eats up about half, or about a third of the total funding, and we try it for 6 months and see how it works. If we feel that it is providing a benefit to employees, to the council, and to the public with added security, well, then we can look towards budgeting for that for next year. And so the thought process is right now, let's try it for the next few months. We'll get a couple of months under our belt before the budget season happens, and we'll know if it's worthwhile at that point to budget for it for next year.
Okay.
You talked about other things that are being worked on and building and that sort of thing. But we went directly to this as a solution. are you really looking at it as interim until you can make those other changes? Or is it something you're thinking that you want, that you believe needs to be here long-term?
My
Is that
conversations
just-
with the police department have been, this might be worthwhile long-term. So let's try it out now, see how it works, see if it's a good fit for the city. And if it is, we'll propose it in next year's budget, in addition to some of the other changes that we're talking about. I don't want to say that, once we implement the security guard contract, we're locked into this for years and years to come. I think this is, let's try it for the first few months, see how it is, and if it's successful, we'll continue to budget for it. The cost to budget for it would be about $94,000 a year in next year's budget. And again, that's already allocated in the budget, so we wouldn't have to find additional funding for it for next
Right.
year because it's already built into the budget for this year.
But
But
we'll
we
need
may
to find,
find,
we'll need to find money for next year,
Yeah,
right? That's got to get put into the budget for next year and authorized.
well, yeah, technically, yes, yes. What I'm saying is it's already built into this year's budget, so you don't need additional money to carry it over into next year's budget, because it's already part of the $150,000 that's allocated, if that makes sense. It can be looked at both ways, depending on how you look at it.
I have a question really quick. I'm assuming the police department did compare what it would cost us to just hire a position versus hiring outside. I guess I'm a little surprised by this dollar amount, that it's not cheaper for us. I understand benefits play into it, but that it's not cheaper for us to just add a position. I'm guessing they compared the two?
I don't have an answer to that. I'm sure the police have assessed that, but I don't know that offhand.
Okay. Yeah, personally, I mean, I agree with Alder Johnson on the fact that when we allocated $150,000, in my head, I envisioned one-time things that could be done to City Hall to make it safer overall, not a continuing cost. And I also agree with Alder Hankfest that what we're showing our residents when they walk into City Hall, is that intimidation or is that welcoming? And I want to be very careful, again, making sure our staff is safe, but we do it in a welcoming way. Personally, I really want to see the full security plan, just like the ARPA funds. I was the one that brought up, hey, let's take all this to the table at once.
Yeah, let's-
I personally could not stand the piecemealing together because it was hard to prioritize what was more important. So I don't want to go at this the same way. So I would like to see the full plan before we make any decision.
Make a motion to hold until the next meeting and ask staff to bring back with closed session language additional insight on the security plan, the overall security plan, and information that precipitated this particular request.
I think the focus on service is critical, that it's welcoming when somebody walks into City Hall, and not having somebody there, that is not welcoming at all. So I would love to see the whole security plan also. Because I would think that there's got to be some big costs, if you've got to modify the building for security.
So that's a second then? Are you
That's a
saying-
second, yes.
Okay.
And those
Sorry.
big costs would likely come during a bonding discussion, which is fine, but I think it would just help us to see the overall vision of what we're trying to achieve, because right now, we just don't have that. And I think that's important for us to make really good decisions. And the other thing that I would be curious, and this isn't part of the motion, but just I would encourage staff to come back with, what other public facilities have security like this that are of comparable size, right? To my knowledge, our county building doesn't have it, courthouse doesn't have it. So I'm thinking about like Appleton City Hall or, La Crosse or Beloit or Kenosha, something like that. Do they have, any types of similar services? I think that kind of stuff sometimes helps us understand if we're, like, what end of the spectrum we're in, right? Are we lagging our peers or are we leading our peers?
Yeah, I think part of that discussion also goes into, accessibility to the rest of the building. A lot of these new
Yeah.
facilities that are built, there's one entrance, you gotta walk through it past a front counter, and you just can't get through unless you're buzzed in or something to that effect.
Right.
This city hall is not designed that way currently, not to say
That's
we
a fair
can't get
point,
to
Dan. Yeah.
to something like that, but it's,
Yeah, and I don't want you to spend a ton of time on that piece, but it's just more of a curiosity factor. Shoot, I forget what I was gonna ask. No matter, it'll come back.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 2, consideration with possible action on the approval of the Claims Committee report.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Oh, sorry, motion carries. Informational 2022 contingency account, $240,350. And the next Finance Committee meeting will be held on June 18th, 2024 at 4:30.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Well, can we do a conversation to restart?